I would like to welcome our first speakers today, artists Betye Saar and Alison Saar, as they join us for a special discussion charting their work as two generations of mother and daughter artists. Betty's work, Gelede, is not only included in the exhibition, but also recently acquired by the Crystal Bridges collection. Oh, you all can keep going. It isn't. It is an absolute honor to have them both in conversation today. I will be here with them, but not really. They don't really need me. So let's get started.
All right. So.
Hi.
Hi. This is very casual. I guess we can start with the first slide. And we're going to take a little bit of a different approach. And you can see the images down there too, right, Mommy?
Yes. First of all, good morning.
Yes.
I thought I would start with the beginning of my adventure of being an artist and the things that made an impression that formed my art. And we're starting at the beginning with the Watts Towers. My paternal grandmother lived in Watts, California. And from the time, I guess I was about 4 or 5, we would visit her. And she lived maybe on 117th Street. But to do her shopping and marketing, once a week she would walk down the railroad tracks and we would go with her. And walking down the railroad tracks, to our left, going up to Watts, was Simon Rodea building the Watts Towers.
Great.
Number one impression. Number one impression, because I was a kid that liked the mysterious, the magical, the unknown, the other. And here was the other being constructed right in front of me. She didn't have any information about what it was, and I didn't really have any information until I was an adult and had a chance to visit the Watts Towers. Next slide.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Watts Towers was obviously very formative for me as well. And you can see, I think I'm 2 here with my older sister, Leslie. And so it was a regular stop that we would go to and kind of experience the beauty of that. And I think one of the things that you really pulled out of that was the notion of what was then not known as recycling, but using found materials and kind of incorporating things that other people would see as detritus or trash that were something that you collected. And I know also growing up in Laurel Canyon, where Betty still lives, we moved there in the 60s. It was an area that had been decimated by a massive fire, and there were only 4 existent houses with a lot of houses that had been rebuilt and a lot of empty things. But we would find little bits of glass and all these things kind of in the dirt every time it rained. And I think, that sort of sense of collecting was kind of formed in some ways for you as that too, right?
Yes, also collecting things that other people throw away or things that no longer have a use or a function and putting them together to make something else. And a way of recycling the energy of the object, recycling the purpose of the object to make your own statement.
Well, that the objects almost kind of have their own history and their own sort of
That's right,
spirit to them, which I think is really evident in both of our works. But I think what's also interesting that even though we would visit the Watts Towers, we were kind of living up in Laurel Canyon, up on the hill and somewhat removed. And while I know Samela and Suzanne Jackson and the Brockman Gallery and Cecil Ferguson, which was mentioned earlier, were all very instrumental in your career. Part of being an artist is that time and space in your studio where you're alone. And it seems to me that much of your inspiration came from materials. And so I think how we're going to arrange this conversation is around the materials and the things that she's found. And so we're kind of using these as like little cues to kind of move into talking about different pieces. Does that sound good to you?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to start by saying my formal education was at UCLA, a major in design, a minor in sociology. And at that time, we're talking about late 30s, 40s, blacks did not go to art school. Very few of them did. And I think there was one fellow who finally was accepted into Chenard, but he was also in design and graphic design. So I never had the ambition of being an artist. I always liked art. Art was always surrounding our family. Grandmothers that painted china or made quilts or something like that. My mother was a seamstress. We made clothes, we did fashion and things like that. But art as per se just didn't happen in our lives. So that was another hurdle that I had to overcome to realize that what I was doing was making art. And we're going to start with some of the materials that attracted me. It happened when I went back to school to get a master's at Long Beach State University, and I passed the printmaking room and was seduced by printmaking. So my early art experience was making prints.
Yeah, we can go to the first slide. I think I was 2 or 3 when you were working at Long Beach.
Yeah.
And so my earliest memories are from looking up underneath printing presses and the smell of asphaltum and all of that. But and I should also say that, aside from, the, education options not always be open to Black artists, I think being a woman and a mother also further compounded that. And we were talking about how women artists kind of fit into that. And so, in a lot of ways, you had to kind of overcome a lot of hurdles, and, a lot of the art making happened at home. And that was, in some ways it isolated you, but I think in other ways it really allowed you to kind of really find your own very personal trajectory, looking at, just things that are kind of within your reach, sort of, as well.
Yes, when I was making art, the women's movement had not started, nor the civil rights movement had not started. I just did what I liked. My studio was in my kitchen, because that's where I had the assets and stuff to make prints. And people have asked me, what's it like to be a mother, to be a woman, and still be an artist? Well, I couldn't see any difference. It's all about creativity and how you divide the time, If your kid is sick, you stay home and take care of your kid. And and when you have spare time, then you would make a drawing or a print or anything. But it all meshed together. And I like to think of it more as a creative lifestyle than being just an artist. So this is a photograph or slide of my early prints, because I was very interested in the mystical life of hands, the palmistry, how to tell your fortune by that, or the phrenology, how the areas of your head told different aspects of your personality, and of astrology, of what the stars and the moon and the sun say. So this is an early print of mine, which later on, these were all individual prints, and then later on I framed them in a window, which made it like an art object. Next slide.
So I think one of the things you were saying that helped that transition from being a printmaker to someone that was working in Assemblage was the Pasadena Museum of Art had an exhibition of Joseph Cornell. And you went to see that, and you said, what? I can put stuff in there? I can just use all these things I love and want to collect and kind of make it into something? So you wanted to touch on that experience?
So then I moved from sort of the two-dimensional work of something flat, printmaking or framed in a window, into creating boxes.
So example, in this, these are old, like you can see the Prince Albert cigarette tobacco case, and Mott's apple juice and all these things. I don't know if they even still exist anymore, but these were just, again, things that were coming out of the kitchen and cutting up things and putting them into there.
I think the kitchen is a very creative place,
well, we had vats of acid in the kitchen, so kind of treacherous. Should we go to the next slide?
Yes, so here we are at Black Girl's Window. At the top area, that's the remainders of my prints. I never threw away anything. I was a real junkie. I just collected and kept everything. And that probably goes back to Simon Rodilla of collecting scraps of fragments of fabric and ceramics and anything that he found that was thrown away. So the first panel or panes of this window are about the mysticism and the early prints that I had. One panel is about a family. It's a Valentine, I think, from the 30s. It was about my family. Unfortunately, my father died when I was quite young, and my mother remarried, but we always had a family. And on the other side is the mysticism of the phrenology chart. But in the center is death. And I think that comes from the death of my father at an early age, and also the fact that the materials that I have are dead materials, fragments, broken things, discards. And not that I'm a morbid person, but there is a little bit of melancholy in much of my work. The pain with the lion is for my birth sign Leo, and in the center is the ancestral part of me because I come from mixed heritage, and the other side is about love, the aspects of my life, and here I am pressing against the window of life, looking out and life coming in.
Should we go to the next slide?
Next slide.
Thank you. So this is a piece titled Mind Mojo's Secrets.
Yes, do we
And
have
we've got-
something from that?
there
Oh,
we go.
yeah. We have the serpent, yeah. A lot of my work has snakes in it, and mostly not only because of design and the shape, but of the idea of using organic materials. And that developed on a trip to Chicago when the National Conference of Artists had a conference, and David Hammonds and I went to that conference. And then when we had a break in our schedule, we went to the Field Museum. At that time, the Field Museum had all the ethnic art in the basement. They were just stored there. There weren't any display fancy cases like there are now. So I saw for the first time art from Egypt and Africa and the oceanic islands. And it was just really exciting to see about how people made art without making it be art. But it was part of their ritual and the organic materials that they used. One thing that really impressed me was a garment that the chief wore, which was just like a piece of fabric with the hole tucked in, and the head went through that. But the fabric was covered with a little bit of hair from everyone in the tribe. And how the power of that object had, putting things together to increase the power of something. So that concept sort of made an imprint in my head about the more you put in that blends with something, the more the power is increased.
That was also, I think, Arnold Rubin, who was at UCLA, an African art
That's
historian, had written that really wonderful article, The Power of Accumulation, and really talking about
Yes.
how libations and the layering and the hands-on with an object that, you make your piece, but then when it leaves the studio, it takes on another life, and that people touching things and having a relationship, that the piece continues to grow and develop spiritually.
So the room, that's the Betye Saar room, are objects that developed out of that experience of going to the Field Museum and starting to collect materials that had to do with fur, had to do with something that had been alive at one time. At the bottom of the other piece, we have fur and feathers and things hanging down from it. Some bones, some shells. I think when I went to Festex on a trip to the beach, which was in the Indian Ocean, I think, I collected shells. So some of those shells are in that. So I collected certain items from different places. So it's also the idea of organic materials from different places put together with my own feelings about art. At the exhibition, there's a piece of leather. Alonzo Davis at one time gave me some hides that were cut, so they were painted leather pieces that are in that show. And then we have Spirit Catcher. Spirit Catcher also goes back to the Watts Towers, of building something on top of it. I think it starts out with a rattan stool with other objects on it. I know some of the shells and things there were from the Festax excursion. Yeah.
Should we
good
move on
catching.
to, here's another thing, and, Betty's iconic piece, The Liberation of Aunt Jemima. So we brought you a little spoon rest.
Collected this. From the 60s, I started collecting derogatory images of black people. And I thought, oh, how sad. Black people never had a chance to see each other except for a derogatory image, something that kind of made fun of them. So I collected those images, and from those images came a whole series of works, because it's also about not my ancestral history like the organic pieces were, but a distant history, but still part of my history that unfortunately exists today.
Still painful, yeah.
The
Well, I think in part of your starting collecting, you started seeing these when you would go to the Pasadena flea market, which was kind of like this ritual of collecting
and
stuff.
in the Bay Area, the Alameda flea market.
Right, but you would see these things, and part of the idea of purchasing them was so that they wouldn't fall into the wrong hands, basically, and to not let them kind of, continue to be, seen in those ways, and so not letting them, continue lives as derogatory images, but then coming in and then you empowered them and you kind of turned the tables on every one of them.
And of course, my most important piece, I guess, is The Liberation of Aunt Jemima. And that started out as an emotional thing of the rage of the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that's where I learned how to recycle within myself anger and emotions into a creative process, because being creative and making art is restorative and healing. And a woman named E.J. Montgomery, who lived in the Bay Area, who worked at the museum in Oakland, proposed a show for the artists in the Bay Area in Los Angeles to create a hero, because the civil rights was going on at that time, so she wanted black heroes. Well, I didn't have a hero, but I had a shero, and Aunt Jemima is my shero. So the figure itself is just a plastic figure that I found at the Alameda flea market that I recycled, and it was like, I thought, this is really strange. Slavery is over, but they have manufactured all these objects and things that still worked, especially in the kitchen, the cookie jar. This is like a wall hanger that has a broom handle and a notepad. Right. And like the darkie on the lawn to hold your horses and all of that stuff. So I wanted to make my shero a warrior, and Aunt Jemima became my warrior. And the background, of course, is the label from the Aunt Jemima pancake flour,
which was modernized a little
Yes.
bit. They slowly worked their way out of the kerchief becomes a headband, but
So that's the Liberation of Aunt Jemima.
We can go to the next piece. Yeah. And so this is titled I Will Bend But I Won't Break. And you can see there's an image of a woman. Aside from the graphic of the slave ship floor plans, there's a woman ironing and, hence bending her back. Yeah. And what you cannot see is the KKK.
What we can't see is it's about labor, and it's about slavery, and it's about the sheet is hanging up, and it has the initials KKK
on the side
embroidered on it, which I found really sort of curious. That in order for them to have their clean white sheets, a black woman had to wash and iron it for them. It's something to think about. That's I'll bend, but I will not break.
All right. You mean right along here.
Oh, yes. My great Aunt Hattie, who came from Missouri, Kansas City, and came to the United States, and who raised my mother. When she passed in 1974, she left a trunk full of photographs and memorabilia from her life, from her other life. And Many of them were like women's things, gloves and handkerchiefs and dresses and letters, lots of love letters and things like that. So I took on a new series of recycling the throwaways from her life into creating new objects. And this is Record for Hattie, which is an autograph book, a mirror,
Quilt pieces.
and yes.
Well, she was very elegant and had really beautiful, a lot of finery and all of these really elegant things. And, kind of, I felt to me somehow was reflective, a lot was going on in the Harlem Renaissance and a moment where African Americans became, had affluent, jobs and lives and things like that. And so I thought those were really beautiful
But with
pieces.
this series, I began a series of personal history, things that had happened from my lifetime, things that I collected from my lifetime. And the series using a photograph in a box or a collage was part of it. And this is Record for Hattie, my Aunt Hattie.
All right, next slide. Here. This is an old, beautiful circuit board. And so, how does technology come into your work?
It came through discards like this, because as soon as something is used, then it's thrown away. And this one doesn't have anything on it, but the silver and gold things were really elements that were used, that were precious elements that were used to manufacture the parts that go for your TV or whatever you've got.
Very
So
gem-like.
technology came in. I'm not really a technology person, but I really liked these things, and I really wanted to make something of them. Yeah. All these little abstract patterns. And also, there was a movie that I had seen called The Gods Must Be Crazy. You seen that movie? Where something was thrown out, a Coke bottle was thrown out, and it was found by a tribe, and it became a magical object. And I said, technology's magic. I mean, it's magic to me. I don't know how it happens.
Disemboweled technology.
So then I started a series using these elements of, we have
Circuit
another,
boards.
this
Yeah.
is one, yes.
And
like
then the next one,
background.
and then, so from this tiny piece, it's kind of
Yeah, tiny
expanded,
piece,
and she
yeah.
did this piece, the next slide is an image of Mojo Tech.
Yeah, let's go back to the other
Oh,
one
I'm
first
sorry.
again. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I find materials. At this time I was on a residency at MIT, and I took a bunch of these things, and I had the black one there. I was walking down the street, and I found there's a little figure there. And I said, this is a strange little figure. So I reached down in the gutter and picked it up and wiped it off, and it became the figure in this piece. Then there's some other objects. I think the end that goes on a cigar holder. The grid behind that is a piece from a battery, and the base is a wood block from India.
Oh, batik block.
Yeah, a heat block.
Indonesian. Uh-huh. Right. So
And
we're
it's-
always, actually, both of us are often walking with our heads down.
Yeah.
Because we're looking, constantly
If you don't want to
surveying.
walk with anybody that picks up everything they see,
We
then
walk
you're not walking
real
with us.
slow.
So, yeah. So this is the Guardian of Desire. I also like titles that are sort of poetic.
Well, you sometimes give lectures where you just read the
Just
titles.
read the titles
And show the images and don't
slide,
talk
yeah.
about the pieces.
So when I was at Mojo at MIT, I created a mural, and the mural
That's the next thing.
The mural is called Mojo Tech, and it's about the magic of technology. And it starts out with blues and greens, suggesting the organic part right into the center of it, which is an altar that's created from all the weird things that you find inside of radios and TVs and all of that other stuff that's just thrown away.
But I think what's interesting when you look at these circuit boards is, they're really beautiful in their design and just very elegant in their colors, and they're very useful. But when they become, these kind of, objects separate from their, function. It's about potential, and it's about, how these things contain information in a weird sort of, the spirit of information that is fed through them, too. So I think that kind of feeds back to your other found objects in terms of having a history and having an integrity and a spirit of their past lives and how they go through you and then have a future life as
And
well.
recycling it to say something else,
Yeah.
which is important.
So this is quite
Most of
large.
the time.
Sorry. Oh, we're good.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go.
Oh, yeah.
You can get-
Oh, yes, nice.
About 5 minutes.
This is one of my,
Oh, okay.
my images to suggest chance and luck, good and bad. What else do I have that's like
Well,
that?
let's move on because I think we're getting
Okay,
bogged
we're getting
down.
there.
So next one is your series that you did about cages.
Yes, we have cages. Do we have a cage in the show?
Nope,
No.
this would be more recent work.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of feeds back to kind of really talking about sort of the sort of resurgence of this political climate that we're experiencing now. We could just go through these two real quickly. And then we did
The cage, which you think the cage is for containment, for either, like in a prison or for birds or for animals or something. And in this particular one, which is called the destiny of longitude and latitude, was very personal because it's about the process of aging. I have a braid there, which my grandmother had a long gray braid, so it's about, for me, that symbolized the aging part of it. And the ships symbolize the ships of slavery. Also, hair is the water, too. The hair makes the water. Not whatever, yeah. And then I have the sun above to go back to suggest my interest in astrology and the other mystical elements.
let's go to the next slide, Alpha and Omega,
Oh, yes.
which we had a
This is
clock
the
face
alpha.
for.
I am the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. So this starts out with a cradle of glass balls, which suggests childhood and the hopes that we have about our youth and for our children, into different assemblages that line the wall. The chair on the two chairs and the candle on the table about the passing of time, and above is a ship about going into the unknown, the alpha and the omega.
And then the last two slides.
Yes, the
Watermelon.
washboard, which we're going back to my interest in slavery and racism and so forth. There was a slide that I wanted to talk about, but I think we passed it. So I started collecting the washboard. How many of you have never seen a washboard?
No.
Yeah, you see?
There you go.
Somebody's
They've all seen them in Betye Saar art.
Yeah.
Somebody's grandmother or great aunt or somebody in your past has had a washboard because they were before washing machines. But it suggests the labor, the work that went with that. And it was just a fun thing to put art on. So sometimes I use the title of it. This is called Made Right. And
Which
it
is what's on
has
next,
the Aunt Jemima figure. Do we have another one?
Yeah, one more, and then one after this. So let's,
okay.
And so
Wait,
basically.
we skipped one. Yeah. I thought there was another washboard.
Nope.
Okay.
And I think we're short on time.
Okay.
That's it.
I'm still
That's all
making the
there is.
washboards. I tried to give them up, and I did. And then for maybe like, at least that I can remember, like 4 years, there was a lot of police brutality, especially against black men. And I wanted to bring back the derogatory images which seem to be locked in somebody's mind of how to treat black people. And from that came this Aunt Jemima piece called Sock It to 'Em. Yeah.
And we can walk out on the last image, which is just Betty in the glory of all of her wonderful things. So anyway,
This is
thank
my
you so
studio.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.